Welcome to another episode of OutSolve's OutRageous HR podcast, where we give you compliance best practices. I'm your host, Catherine Bourdreaux, account executive here at OutSolve, and joining me today is Desiree Throckmorton.
Hello, Desiree Throckmorton. I've been with OutSolve for 7 years. I've been in HR compliance for over 20 years, and I'm part of our I-9 team.
And today we'll be talking all about the authorized representative element of the I-9s. So Desiree, what is one of the more outrageous stories that you have pertaining to this topic?
I do have many stories about authorized reps who did not complete the process correctly. There was one time where an authorized rep that we had engaged charged the employee $25 to complete their I-9, which is actually not acceptable.
Outrageous, some may say.
Yes, agree.
So tell me, Desiree, what is an I-9 authorized rep?
Essentially, it's anyone that the employer designates to complete the I-9 on their behalf. And they do accept the risk of whomever they choose to complete that. So training is a must for these people, but some employers just outsource it to the person's neighbor to say, you can go ahead and verify the person's identity and work authorization and complete Section 2 of the I-9, which I think it comes with a lot of risk.
That brings me to my next question. Can anyone serve in this role?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, the employer can designate, as I mentioned, to where the employee chooses that representative. Sometimes people outsource it to vendors to complete that process. Some challenges there is understanding what training did that person have to complete that process. I know very well that it's easy to get that wrong, and there's a lot of rules around how you engage in that process. So how does your neighbor next door know that they can't accept a passport, a driver's license, and a social security card?
Which seems like a lot of responsibility. So what are these reps authorized to do?
Well, they're essentially working on the behalf of the employer to verify the identity and work authorization of the employees who are going to work for the employer.
So what risks do employers run when using designated reps?
Well, I-9s are audited based on accuracy predominantly. And so if someone is untrained and completing Section 2, how do they know what document number to put in Section 2? How do they know, as I mentioned, what documents are acceptable or not? But not only that, it creates more work for the employer, because I assume that if you're going to have someone's neighbor conduct that verification appointment, that the employer would then audit the records, audit the information entered. So it feels like more work for the employer to have to chase down any of those errors. And obviously you don't want to have errors, given that the audits are based on errors in the I-9 and in the process.
So why is it important to provide training and guidance for these reps?
I think for efficiency of creating a process that makes sense, if people are untrained, you're making more work for yourself, frankly, and you're opening up the employer for risk.
What should HR consider when choosing reps?
They should choose somebody who knows what they're doing. They should choose somebody who has been trained and who knows the latest of the programs that have been eliminated by the administration. They need to understand the nuances of the documents that are eligible for work authorization and identity. That's not easy. That's not something that your neighbor knows. I can guarantee that. My neighbor certainly doesn't know that. So I think the important thing is just making sure that they have the information they need to conduct the appointment properly.
And how can they set up that person for success?
I think employers can set up that person and those people for success because you probably have multiple designated verifiers by regularly making sure they're trained. But that means someone in the organization has to have the root information to train them. So you need to have the connection to the up-to-date information. What's the current form you should be using? There's a lot around getting this right. So I think spending the time to regularly check in, regularly make sure that they're processing things correctly and consistently is a very good starting point. And one way to kind of resolve that is by conducting an internal audit. You might find that you're training these folks, but that through the audit you found maybe they're processing a little bit differently based on their understanding of the training material.
So you mentioned to me that in 2023 there was a change in the regulations that allowed for more flexibility around remote verifications. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's kind of a game changer, actually. It's during COVID, a lot of things changed for employers, and there was a sort of allowance for employers to conduct the appointment, the Section 2 completion, virtually through like a video call. Prior to that, it was always done in person. And, HR is not really set up that way. So having folks conduct the verification appointment is pretty challenging when you're having to be in person, like having designated reps for every single person that starts employment, especially with the remote environment that also came out of COVID. So that allowance kind of opened up to some degree during COVID. But in 2023, they formalized the remote provision that allows employers to complete the verification appointment over video, assuming that they are E-Verify employers and in good standing.
So it sounds like this will be really beneficial for employers who have to do this in a remote environment. Can you tell me a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, definitely. I think that it makes more sense. I mean, the fact is that most HR people who would be designees to complete this are not going to be able to do this for every person that they hire. I mean, that would be a lot of people in a lot of buildings across the United States. That's very difficult to actually do when all they're doing is something that takes like 6 minutes, right? 6 minutes to do this verification. And so having to have someone physically there, it's an outdated concept. And so the remote provision, I think, is kind of a game changer for employers to be able to, just conduct that appointment virtually, and people don't have to be in the same building. I mean, a lot of employers have moved to remote work. I mean, I have some clients that are predominantly remote. So how would you do that if you have employees working all over the country?
Do you have any specific tips for those working in a hybrid workspace or a completely dispersed workforce?
That's a good question. And I think that having a consistent practice is the most important thing. So sure, you could probably have some of your folks completing them, and then maybe some of them, virtually. You do have to have consistency, and that is one of the rules around, governing this process. But I think the consistency of making sure that the people are doing it, having a consistent process and practice. And so if you have different methodologies, that could create some variances that might introduce some problems.
All right, Desiree, I'm going to hit you with some rapid fire questions.
Let's do it.
What is your top advice for companies relying on authorized reps?
Make sure they're trained. Ask specifically for the training material and verify it, and ask them how often it's done.
Where can people go to get help or resources?
The USCIS, they have a lot of really great resources. They have a lot of webinars and material. I think they're a great resource.
How does OutSolve's I-9 verification solution support trained I-9 authorized users?
We have trained agents that have resources to complete the process regularly and consistently. And so I feel like this is one of those areas where if you do it all the time, you get really good at it. Muscle memory makes you really responsive in this.
And what should you do if a rep makes a mistake?
If a rep makes a mistake, boy, rapid fire, you need to be thoughtful and methodical about how you correct it. There are lots of rules around how you make corrections based on errors that are found.
All right, Desiree, any final thoughts to close us out?
I would say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Getting it right the first time is important, and that is done through thought of process and trained individuals.
Thanks, Desiree. OutSolve helps clients manage Form I-9 completion from start to finish. We offer mobile-friendly Section 1 completion, trained authorized reps for remote Section 2 verification, E-Verify case creation and tentative non-confirmation escalation, digital storage and document retention, mock audit internal support. If you'd like to learn more, visit outsolve.com today. We have a host of resources on our website related to Form I-9 completion, such as an I-9 audit checklist. Thank you so much for joining us today, Desiree. That's all we have for this week. We'll see you next time.